Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Davenport. I'm a Deputy Program Manager for the State Coastal Conservancy's Bay Area Program and the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. And those agencies are two of the major funders of wetland restoration projects, including transition zone projects in San Francisco Bay. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to moderate this panel because of all the connections I see among the folks who will be speaking to you. I think this group exemplifies one of the themes of this workshop, which is that science, community engagement, and leadership development are all connected and related. So let me first tell you a little bit about the speakers. The first is Alex Thomsen, environmental planner with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership. She supports the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program that you just heard a lot about, or WRMP, and she'll be discussing the work of the WRMP's People and Wetlands Work Group, which you also have heard a little bit of sneak preview of. So they are developing ways to measure the benefits that wetlands provide to communities with a focus on equity. Next, we'll hear from my colleague, Linda Tong, a project manager with both the Coastal Conservancy and the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. And Linda will be sharing the authority's work to advance equity in our grant programs, as well as some of the exemplary stewardship work happening on wetlands owned by the Conservancy at the Novato Baylands and managed by what you heard about earlier, Point Blue Straw program, including hands-on youth engagement. And finally, we'll hear about the exciting work going on in East Palo Alto from two speakers. One is Barbara Camacho Garcia, project lead with Grassroots Ecology, a nonprofit that engages communities in habitat restoration and stewardship in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. And the other you've already heard from this morning, Violet Wulf-Saena, founder and executive director of Climate Resilient Communities. She also serves as the equity program manager for the Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network, or BayCAN, and as an environmental justice advisor for the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. So Barbara and Violet will be discussing their partnership on a fantastic community engagement and transition zone habitat restoration project at Cooley Landing and the Ravenswood Open Space Preserve. So in exploring how people connect to wetlands, we've been learning a lot about the importance of the transition zone. Most people won't be wading out into the mud, but they can just get involved in restoring habitat along the margins of wetlands. They may also at the same time learn about traditional uses of native plants, express themselves through art, and maybe even find a path to an environmental career through this work. And I would also say that the transition zone is where the traditional restoration practitioners and community organizers are meeting on the margins of their comfort zones to find new ways to work together and better serve communities and the environment. So I think one thing we'll be talking about is how can wetland restoration be part of opening ourselves up to new types of knowledge and relationships in order to address the challenges of climate change and social injustice. Well, I know you're eager to hear what they all have to say. So without further ado, let's welcome Alex Thomsen to give the first presentation.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Alex Thomsen from the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, and I'll be talking about the People and Wetlands Work Group of the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program, or WRMP. And in my talk, I'll be sharing some key themes that have emerged so far from our work developing human dimensions and equity indicators for wetland monitoring. So the topics I'm going to cover in this talk include the motivation and objectives for the work group, a little bit about the process, including the types of expertise involved on this work group, what's involved in indicator development, and the big picture management questions that we're developing these new indicators to address. And then I'll wrap up by sharing some major themes, including the primary areas of interest of the work group for developing new indicators and some other key takeaways. So the objectives of the work group are to develop indicators, metrics, and methods for monitoring the human connections to wetlands. And in development of these new indicators, we are trying to emphasize community and tribal values, align with information needs of decision makers, so that any new data we collect or any new products we produce have an audience and a purpose in mind. Enable evaluation of equity questions about who benefits from wetlands and wetland restoration, and incorporate diverse ways of understanding wetland health. So considering things like how social science and community-based monitoring methods can really help make this a more robust program in understanding the health of the wetlands. And the program sees this as a really important component of monitoring because understanding the human dimensions of wetlands or how people are interacting with and benefiting from wetlands can provide a new lens that we use to look at the impact of all of these investments in restoration projects and can help us communicate more with the public about what are the benefits of wetlands, why people should care about them, whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and to support or to generate continued support for increased funding for this type of work that all of us work on. So these are the areas of expertise represented on the work group. People self-selected these categories, and there is some overlap, like people representing multiple areas of expertise. So we have a fair number of government agency representatives, as well as NGOs, restoration practitioners, social scientists, and under-resourced or frontline community representatives, as well as some others, which you can see on the bottom right of this slide. So this slide is to show you the general components involved in our process of developing indicators. So the work group started meeting in October 2022. So it's been running for almost a year now. And we started off by developing the big picture management questions that we're trying to address with new indicators. And I'll share those questions, I think, on my next slide. We have also started kind of narrowing down from those big picture questions, like how do we translate those into more discrete monitoring questions and indicators that the program can produce to answer those bigger picture questions. So that's currently what we're working on. And our next phase will be developing actual methods or standards for monitoring and developing these products. And throughout this, the top row is just showing that we're reviewing other monitoring programs and literature about human dimensions and surveys that have been done about benefits of wetlands to inform the development of indicators and learn from what others have already been working on. So these are the management questions that the People in Wetlands Work Group developed and that have been approved by the WRMP Steering Committee. So they're officially part of the program now. So they're asking, how are the benefits of wetlands distributed regionally and among different demographic groups? How does the provision of benefits progress over time at existing and restored wetland sites? And this third question, the work group modified an existing management question of the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program to encourage the program to think about public access in addition to these other elements of restoration, and to think about how the monitoring program can help bring to light important data on public access, share it in our public data platform so that it can be analyzed in relation to these other elements of restoration. So you'll notice that these first two questions are a little bit vague in referencing the benefits of wetlands. You might be wondering what benefits we're talking about. And so that's what I'll be going through on this slide, the major areas of interest or benefits that the work group has really been focused in talking about for developing new indicators. And for all of these, we're considering an equity lens for every benefit. So we've been talking about shoreline protection, both erosion control and flood protection, with the ideas for new indicators or products mostly being focused on flood protection. Thinking about water quality as a benefit that's really important to communities. Inclusive access, which is not just where are there wetlands with public access nearby, but also the quality of that access. Like, are there amenities that people want to see at those sites? And how safe and welcome do people feel in those spaces? And we're also talking about the importance of community involvement in stewardship, as well as governance and decision-making about wetlands, and involvement in knowledge production and transmission, which includes a wide range of things. We're talking about things like education programs, community-based science, and other forms of knowledge. So again, with all of these, we're thinking about how we can develop indicators that quantify these benefits, see how they vary around the region, and also how they vary between like vulnerable or economically disadvantaged communities and other communities. So some other key takeaways I wanted to share that aren't all about developing indicators. So sense of belonging is something that's been highlighted as particularly important by the People in Wetlands work group. There may be really well-managed wetlands near vulnerable communities with publicly accessible trails, but if people don't see them as spaces that are meant for them, and if they don't feel welcome there, they won't get the benefits of using them and participating in activities there. This is one that's been talked about throughout the past 2 days, but the work group has emphasized that community involvement is really important throughout all stages of projects. So from the planning and the design into implementation, and also into the actual monitoring and producing results. So involving community members in the monitoring can help them feel more ownership, I guess, of the site and making sure it stays healthy, helping connect other community members to the space, and also thinking about how to produce results that are relevant to their communities and in ways that are accessible. There's also recognition of a need for public education and outreach about the benefits that wetlands provide and whether they're providing them. So this is not just about collecting new data that people might be interested in, but just thinking about what data the program is already thinking about collecting and how to share that with the communities, because community members may be interested in using the data in their own decision-making. And this really ties back to a focus on community health and well-being. All of these indicators that we've been talking about, the focus is really on thinking about how wetlands can be spaces that contribute to improved community health and well-being, and also how like monitoring and other activities can contribute to that well-being. So I want to acknowledge the work group members, which you can find on the WRMP website, and the co-facilitators, Keita Price and Denise Walker, as well as the co-managers of the WRMP at the San Francisco Estuary Institute, and our funders. So that is all I have, and I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thank you, Alex. Hi again, my name's Linda Tong with the California State Coastal Conservancy and the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. And today I'll be talking about how both of these funding sources have been able to support community engagement in our projects and our agency processes. The Restoration Authority as a local funding source and the Coastal Conservancy at the state level. I do want to start off by saying, though the Coastal Conservancy and the Restoration Authority are funding agencies, we do a lot more than just fund wetland restoration. We are in a unique position that we're connected to the scientists and experts who are creating the frameworks and metrics that are related to wetland migration. And we have connections to restoration practitioners and community organizations who are working with people on the ground. And so, you know, in our position, we can be a connector and convener as well as a funder. So diving into the Restoration Authority and how we view community engagement as a priority. We're able to support community engagement in a couple different ways. And one, of course, is through emphasizing community engagement as a priority in our funding requirements. And those are passed on to our grantees. So when we're looking at projects to fund, we are really interested in projects that have strong community benefits. And we're also able to support new partnerships with community-based organizations just through our grantees, as well as directly reaching out to community-based organizations who might be interested in our funding. So the Restoration Authority is a relatively new agency. So it's been really fun, interesting to be able to help build in some of that human dimension into our funding processes. One example of that is that we've been able to develop a community grants program. And we have an advisory committee that provides recommendations on various aspects of our work. And one of the recommendations that came out of our advisory committee was to create a separate pathway for community organizations to apply for our funding so that they wouldn't need to compete with potentially more established, larger restoration-focused organizations. So that's what staff was able to do. We created a separate pathway for community-based organizations to apply for our funding, working in economically disadvantaged communities. And we wanted to, again, focus on projects that would benefit the region's economy through workforce development, leadership development, engaging youth and young adults. And we wanted to see these like innovative partnerships between community-based organizations and more established restoration organizations. And we're always learning as we go. So in creating a program that is focused on funding community organizations, there's a lot of visioning, training, education that needs to happen for these community organizations and leaders. And we're always wanting to support that. Again, our advisory committee members are always providing valuable input, and we want to incorporate the feedback that we're hearing from our advisory committee members, as well as other organizations. One example of this has been to increase the maximum grant award for our community grants. Another is to continue doing targeted outreach to organizations that we want to reach. Email blasts are great, but a personalized message a phone call goes a long way. And we're also trying to use our current grantees and our advisory committees to expand our network as well. So we're always looking for new relationships that we could be building with organizations we haven't worked with before. Another aspect of our community grants program has been to create a cohort of new and potential grantees to share lessons learned between the organizations, to get additional staff support in managing and navigating a government grant. And this has been a really fun experience. And just shout out to Restoration Authority staff who have been helping to make these happen. As a cohort, we've been able to go on a site visit, hung out in Oakland, visited the Planting Justice Nursery and the future site of the San Leandro Creek Greenway. We've had a couple online workshops where we shared some best practices for writing grant applications and building up a budget, tracking deliverables, and other sorts of grant management tips that have been useful to our grantees. And then, of course, we've been able to connect with community-based organizations and have these organizations get to know each other because they're coming from all different regions of the Bay Area. And this cohort was meant to be a resource for our grantees, but it's also become such a valuable learning experience for staff as well, hearing directly from the organizations we want to reach. And speaking of making connections, the past couple of years, we've been hosting virtual networking sessions. And this was a way for us to talk about our funding to organizations that were interested in learning about our funding. It was a way for organizations to connect with staff and also to each other, sharing lessons learned again. And this year we've been transitioning back to many more in-person events. And I'm sure you all know from this event here, being in person is just has a lot of value that being online doesn't quite get at, though both are valuable. And we've been able to get participants from public agencies, environmental nonprofits, community-based organizations to come and gather. And this year we're also starting up some additional tours that are meant for our board members to come see some of the project sites that we're funding, but they're also open to the public. And we are viewing this as a very natural way for people to come together and network and talk and share ideas. Moving forward, we see that we can continue filling a role of being a convener, facilitating information sharing between different community-based grantees. We're also, I've talked about some of the things that we're working on to try to improve equity within our grant programs already, but we're also developing a long-term framework of equity guidelines that can guide our work through the lifetime of our grant funding, and a framework that comes with metrics and more specific guidelines for how to do our work. And we're also separately working on some tribal engagement recommendations. We're definitely seeing and understanding the importance of working with tribes and not just working on government-to-government consultations, but also including nonprofit organizations that are associated with tribes, non-federally recognized tribes, and doing outreach that way as well. So switching gears a little bit, the State Coastal Conservancy, state funding agency, also has put community engagement at the forefront of our work. And between the two agencies, we've had a lot of information sharing, which is great, so we can build off of each other and learn from each other. So the Coastal Conservancy already has agency goals and equity guidelines that highlight the need for community engagement, and the Restoration Authority has definitely been looking at that as a model and seeing what can be transferred over to Restoration Authority frameworks. Within the strategic plan of the Coastal Conservancy, community engagement is highlighted and pulled out as something we need to continue to do throughout our grant programs. And the Coastal Conservancy also has, for many years, been doing tribal consultations, and now is delving deeper into creating deeper relationships with tribes and having conversations with tribal leaders, not just through a letter, but also having in-person, phone, other conversations with leaders. One of the projects that the Coastal Conservancy is quite involved in is the Novato Baylands Restoration Project. And this is a really great example of community engagement and stewardship at work. You heard from a couple Point Blue staff earlier today, and we feel really lucky that we have Point Blue Conservation Science STRAW program staff partnering with us now on site to help with management of a native plant nursery out at the Novato Baylands, helping with site maintenance and organizing, coordinating volunteers. One thing that's really unique about the Novato Baylands project is there's been a long-term cohort of volunteers who are really dedicated and very knowledgeable about the site. And many of the volunteers are residents around the area and have grown to have a lot of ownership, feel a lot of ownership over the site. And when Point Blue came in as our on-site partner, many of these volunteers, continued on working with Point Blue and have really helped with site management. And volunteers are doing a wide range of restoration activities, from removing invasive plants to planting native plants to extensive bird monitoring and more. And one of my colleagues and I actually went out for an Earth Day cleanup at the site. And it was just really amazing to see the friendship and camaraderie that came out of people coming together to care for the land and care for each other. And we see, this project site, as well as many other project sites that we provide grant funding for, as opportunities to build and deepen relationships with tribes, with residents. There's at the Novato Baylands, there's the Belmarin Keys community and Novato residents right nearby. This project is right in their backyard. So continuing to engage people in that way will, again, help with overall long-term maintenance and support of this site. And I do want to acknowledge that community engagement takes a lot of time and effort at all levels and requires an open mind and a positive attitude. And so just reflecting on what we've heard yesterday and today in the panel discussions and presentations, I'm really heartened by the fact that so many of us are really willing to share information and share stories. And I think that will really help make community engagement hopefully easier and better and maybe faster into the future. And it'll help, it definitely helps keep things in perspective, in a positive perspective for me. That's all I have. Thank you all. I'd like to introduce Barbara and Violet.
Hi all, thank you so much for being here. I'm Barbara, I'm the project lead with Grassroots Ecology. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, we're an environmental nonprofit. We do community-based habitat restoration throughout San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, as far south as Cupertino, north as Redwood City, and east as Alviso.
And good afternoon, everyone. So Violet Wulf-Saena from Climate Resilient Communities. We are a community-based organization working directly with community leaders to plan and respond to climate change. And it is my privilege to be presenting again with you, presenting to you again this afternoon with Barbara here from Grassroots Ecology about our project, the Baylands Restoration Project in East Palo Alto. And it has been a privilege as well. And I want to extend my thanks to Coastal Conservancy and also the San Francisco San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority for the support and also for listening to communities and community organization, because the process getting the grant for this project, I got involved earlier on together with Grassroots Ecology, and the process has been very helpful. And it really helped us to plan for a more equitable and a project that will engage the community. So I fully stand here and say great work to Linda and her presentation, because they really did do justice, allowing and enabling community organizations to access the funds so that we can do equitable and also meaningful community engagement work. So, so thank you, and we're here, and it's a privilege again. Barbara, she's our expert on the ground, and I'll have her lead this presentation.
Thanks, Violet. So this talk, we're just gonna give some context, an overview of the project, go into the restoration work that we've been doing, the workforce development, and then wrap up with community engagement strategies we've used and what we've learned so far. We'll have some time at the end for questions as well. But just to show of hands, I'm just curious, how many of y'all have been to either Cooley Landing or Ravenswood? Wow. Okay, so most of y'all, that's really exciting to hear. These are Cooley Land. I know we've heard Ravenswood echoed throughout today. I'm just making sure we're clear. We're south of the Dunbarton on 84, right south of the Ravenswood Slough as well. Ravenswood Open Space Preserve is owned by the Mid-Penn Regional Open Space District, and Cooley Landing is owned by the city of East Palo Alto and Mid-Penn. We don't own any of the land, we're just contracted stewards, and we really try to merge people and plants together and really help people deepen their relationship with the land and have a sense of ownership that was echoed in earlier presentations. So Ravenswood, all salt marsh habitat. Cooley Landing is slightly upland as well. And there's some history for y'all that are unfamiliar with the decades of degradation that has been done to this area. I'll start off by just kind of talking about the demographic of the city of East Palo Alto. Separate from the city of Palo Alto, there's a very long history of redlining and racist deed restrictions that pushed a lot of people of color and low-income communities to East Palo Alto. Today, it's made up presently mostly Latina, Black, and Pacific Islander communities, and their backyards literally border right along the marsh, and you can oftentimes see, like during a king tide, just how vulnerable it is to flooding. So that's some of the context of what this community looks like now. But in addition to that, like, is a story that's echoed across so many different parts of the world. Landfills and polluters are constantly planned and zoned and systematically put in these communities. So from the 1930s to 1960s, the San Mateo County owned Cooley Landing, and it was a former landfill. You can see the pictures on the bottom right show the open pile burning of trash. And around that same time in the 1930s to 1950s, Leslie Salt owned Ravenswood. So the following marsh around there. You can actually see in this picture what that salt pond production used to look like and the degradation that was done to this land for over many decades. And Violet will share what came up as a result of the environmental justice movement in the 90s.
Yeah, so a little bit of, as mentioned, or Barbara alluded, like the disparities that exist because of, the long history of relining and marginalization. And so, as you can imagine, that it's not only the physical environment that was degraded, but also the morality, the social and economic disparities that also came with all of that. So the community got fed up. There was a Romic, industrial plant there that was polluting the air. East Palo Alto is one of the communities that have the highest asthma rate attacks in the whole of San Mateo County. It continues today because not only that, with the now that Romic doesn't exist anymore, but you can imagine the traffic that goes through these communities from 101, from Dumbarton Bridge, and all the people traveling through East Palo Alto to get to their work. So they continue to face these disparities, but also, as you can see on the slide, the powerful movement by the community to get rid some of these polluters. Also the city, the landfill that existed there has been kept and now has turned Cooley Landing into a space for the community. So Cooley Landing just opened in 2017. And I remember when I was started organizing the community around the design challenge, the Resilient by Design Challenge project. Some of you may have were involved in that. When I brought the community out to Cooley Landing, to this building for the first time, a lot of people didn't know the existence of that space. So it really, creating this opportunity to bring the community out. I'm not saying that now things are better. There are still a lot of disparities that we have to address. However, the existence of projects like this, we are able to organize the community in a different way, not only to elevate the work that's being done, but also building understanding and capacity and understanding of how important these spaces are to them and also to the community.
And just to highlight, so Cooley Landing was the first open space that the city of East Palo Alto purchased and opened for the community. And Ravenswood, it took a while for that salt pond production to be restored. Mid-Penn bought it in 1980, started working on the restoration work, and it wasn't until the 2000s when they were able to breach the levees and really have that tidal action return. So it's a long history in the making that has led us to being here and to our project. So the habitat restoration end of this is at Ravenswood in that upper transitional zone. You can see a map there of our planting areas, and we had a lot of hiccups along the way. I think from when we knew that we were approved for this project to when we actually got to plant was about 2 years waiting because of COVID and permitting. And unfortunately, that meant that our nursery was slow to grow the plants when they got the green light, which meant that we only had 2 months to plant 500 plants. And it also was coupled with extreme rain. We had to cancel a lot of volunteer events, but it's an amazing challenge that we were able to meet this past winter. You can see the before picture in the December 2022 photo. It's been mostly a lot of mustard and radish skeletons and oat grass. And since then, this past month, I took a photo monitoring point, and you can see there's a lot of greendelia and marsh backers growing along the way and providing a lot of habitat. A lot of this I really want to echo is like working in relationship with people. So we worked closely with Mid-Penn. They had a lot of recommendations. They had a mitigation planting area on the other side of this trail. So we learned a lot from them, learned what plants did really well for them. they gave us the tip that gophers really like grandilia, so we learned to cage them before we experienced heartbreak due to like predation, even from like old caging material that they let us borrow. And then we did all this work with all the people who came out. So Violet mentioned we've been working closely with communities before we even started this grant, and the community identified it as a need. But we also worked closely to recruit and outreach for these volunteer events. You can see some pictures there. We've had local schools. This is St. Elizabeth of Seton School. On the upper left picture, had a lot of kids come out. They were really into pulling mustard and radish. You can see on those bottom pictures. We've also worked with a lot of community-based organizations like the East Palo Alto Tennis and Tutoring Club, and also College Track, which is on the bottom right picture. Another organization that worked with us planting a bioswale in Cooley Landing, and the same kids go through like a 10-year period with them from when they're in like elementary school up to like when they graduate from college. So it's really cool to have that same generation of kids come out and like help us steward these areas. And the picture on the top right is that inaugural event that we have with climate resilient communities for our first planting day. But it's been, yeah, a mixture of installing plants in the winter, walking the full length of the Bay Trail, 1.3 miles, and monitoring and pulling, removing invasive species along the way. You can also see like a lot of that weather wasn't always conducive, like that fog and uncertainty in that top right picture. Violet will be talking a little bit more about those community meetings, but one quote that really stuck with me was from Pastor Verges, who said, "Collaboration is working together in the face of uncertainty." And I feel like that picture really emphasizes how we don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's that cloud of fog, but it's really about how we're working together in the meantime to deal with those problems together. The second part of this project is workforce development. These are some pictures of our interns. So as part of this, we really thought critically about how we can make our internship more accessible. And it started long overdue by like paying them. Took, I want to say 3 years before we were able to do that. So it's a recent picture that we added to our programming to pay our interns. And from then on, this project, we really wanted to have these workforce trainings for East Palo Alto residents particularly. And so that goes from like how we announce the job, where we go, usually like farmers market or local events where we're able to outreach to the people like directly, down to like how we design the application process. So we remove some criteria that we used to have as part of this internship, including a college degree or like working toward a college degree. So we were able to remove that, and no, you don't need a college degree to be passionate and interested in learning about native plants and habitat restoration. So we were able to remove that requirement. And we also were able to, instead of having like a resume and cover letter, make it into an approachable Google survey. We were able to collect like long form questions from applicants. And I think all of these really helped to diversify our hiring pool. And we prioritized East Palo Alto people. So here are some interns we have. A lot of them grew up here and have been able to see this land change and even like volunteered with us in the past. But I think a lot of this, it's really important to have people who can come out to our programming, relate to the person that they're seeing, lead the environmental restoration work. And this is something that we're trying to do with our organization at all levels, not just like our interns, but also with the people making the decisions, our board, our directors. And the third part is the community engagement.
Yes. So with our community engagement, as you can see, started from the idea of having the climate change community team that exists in East Palo Alto to help guide the project. And then we selected 3 different organizations to help us with that work. As you can imagine, that all this work that we've been doing, that Grassroots Ecology has been doing at Cooley Landing, most of the time, it's very hard to get the community, the people living there, that Kuli Landing is their backyard, to engage. And that was my main goal, to make sure that the community, the neighbors who live in East Palo Alto will come out and help support the work that Grassroots Ecology are doing at Kuli Landing, but also build that ownership. As you can see that on the photo, that is one of the meetings that was hosted by CRC, bringing these community groups together. I also like to mention that the three groups, even though they were engaged, they are part of our climate change community team. They provide very different services to the community. The church helps with a lot of unhoused population, also with food and hunger. Anamatangi Polynesian Voices is a community organization that works to support Pacific Islanders, but also they are in the space building youth and also working with youth and juvenile and also immigration issues. Alcamita de Vecinos is a community-based organization that works directly with housing issues, especially renters' rights. So as you can imagine, many of these organizations steward land. It's not part of their portfolio, but we are able to create that relationship and partnership with them. And since we've been bringing them on board during this exercise or this project, they have taken the leadership in planning for whatever that is required, not only by the project, but also ensuring that our goal of engaging the hard to reach community members to come out to Kuli Landing and the Ravenswood open space. So this is how, this is our strategy, and we have moved forward. And also during the process, as I've, advised my team and also Grassroots Ecology, let's not rush it. The process, we have to make sure that the community fully understand what the project is and what our goals are, and then for them to get on board. And that's how then we can move fast as we can as soon as they are on board. But also I like to say that a lot of the activities planned for this project, it's not only getting people outside to help with stewardship, but also building their capacity and understanding. Many of our community members don't understand or don't have the knowledge of the biodiversity that exists at Kuli Landing and Ravenswood Open Space. So also we're going to use this project, this opportunity to also build their understanding and the value, to understand how valuable those ecosystems are to their community. What's the next one, Martin?
And there's different ways that we've tried to engage the community, whether it's helping us plant outside or having a habitat restoration task. We've tried going beyond and also offering different types of events like bilingual nature walks and interpretive events, trash cleanups, earth days, and restoration trainings on various topics. You can see some pictures on the top right. We're hosting a bird walk with the primary school, which is a primary school in East Palo Alto. And this is with their special day class. They were really excited to go out and look at birds. I also emphasize that even networking in spaces like this past year, I was at the San Mateo Climate Summit and just sitting with someone in the table who happened to be a KQED reporter who was really interested in sea level rise, and chatting with them opened up this whole avenue of collaborating on a day like the King Tide hike that you can see in the middle picture. And this was an event we did in collaboration with KQED, Climate Resilient Communities, the Exploratorium. They brought out a little moving exhibit to Kuli Landing, and also the San Mateo County that was able to talk a lot about nature-based solutions and what the county is doing at that level. And you can see just how that King Tide line is really close to that trail. And I think it really helped to visualize for a lot of people what the future of sea level rise looks like and inspire people to want to take action. There's also been a nice mix of just celebrating together in community. You can see in the bottom left picture, there's a Dia de los Muertos event we hosted with Climate Resilient Communities, and also Nuestra Casa, which is another East Palo Alto based nonprofit. And together we put this event together to talk about how nature exists in our celebrations, and especially linking it to monarchs and monarch migration as part of this holiday. There are many ways that we're able to kind of make environmental themes more culturally relevant and also be joyous. I know this also was echoed in previous presentations, but like art as a way of like connecting people and nature. The bottom right picture shows a work, or it was our nature art day we did with Latino Outdoors and climate resilient communities again, collaborate on a lot of different events. And that event involved just having people come out, go on a little inspiration walk, look at some flowers, learn about the history and ecology of the site, and then watercolor together. So we're trying to go beyond, have different languages, have different avenues that people are able to connect with us. That's not just working. And I'll also chat about some intentional strategies. So Violet mentioned it's really hard to kind of get participation from the East Palo Alto community if we did nothing. Oftentimes our registration opens and within 2 days, it's like sold out, everyone's already registered. And oftentimes those are people coming in from Palo Alto, Cupertino, San Mateo. So what we've really done to make it intentional is outreach a lot in the East Palo Alto communities. That's including things like local schools. We go to farmers market. Another one of our partners, Fresh Approach, does these farmers markets. And that's really the best way that we're able to kind of be present in the community and interface with people on a weekly basis. And various other community events like this is Cinco de Mayo in the middle. And a lot of this has resulted in just like chatting with different organizations that are tabling at that same event and partnering on different events. Fresh Approach then went and did a planting day with us. So all of these are very much like a network of people that were able to work together alongside. I also mentioned registration fills up quickly. So another strategy we've been doing is reserving some spots that is just for East Palo Alto community members. And when we outreach with them, we use like a promo code system so that there's always spots available. And yeah, offering different types of events. We also do a lot of private events. So if we ever get a school that contacts us directly or an organization that wants to do an event that's just for like their system or their network, we prioritize accepting those in the East Palo Alto community to the local parks. And that's how we've gotten a chance to work with a lot of the schools, organization, and community groups. And the next slide, I'll talk about kind of like, did that work? Which I think is a little hard to answer, but we have been able to kind of take some demographic survey data that's optional for volunteers. It's a really great way for us to get feedback and also to learn from the feedback that they give us and constantly adapt our programming to make it meet everyone's needs. And as part of that demographic feedback, we've been able to take a look at how well it reflects the demographic of the city of East Palo Alto. 86% of our volunteers identify as immigrant or are parents who were immigrants. 33 are low income, and 38 live in East Palo Alto. And just to be extra clear, this is just for Grassroots Ecology. A lot of the work that Violet does with the events that they lead is entirely focused on East Palo Alto specific community, so it would be 100% for theirs. But I think this is a really important baseline as we go into like wrapping up our first year, going into the next 2 years, to really think about honing in our strategies and really reach and be reflective of the volunteers that live in the area.
Yeah, so some of the things that hasn't been shown on the presentation is like some of the ideas that came out of these community leaders who wants to do more than just tabling or earth events. One of the exciting things that we hear from the communities which are in the planning process, like focusing on the value and the gift that these open spaces offer. We're hearing, or we have been in conversation about exploring like the cultural values, especially for Pacific Islanders and also the Latino community who sees the resources on these open spaces as value that provides things that they are used to. So like resources for weaving and so some ideas that have come up from these community discussions around activities, including a weaving event at Coolie Landing, or even songs, right? Creating songs, as because music is part of their culture and how to communicate the value of spaces. So those are some interesting ideas. And I mentioned before that there also have been discussions around why we are not using this space as a cooling, as for swimming for the community. Is it safe? So those discussions are not part of the scope of the project. But that's why CRC is excited, because we can take those ideas and find ways how to move forward and explore more. How can we go about making those things happen for the community? But the challenges, right, as Barbara mentioned, that we have to be mindful of how to engage the community. And I have advised Grassroots Ecology and our other partners, like, if you want to get the community to the event, don't depend on your online invitation. You really have to be in the community. And they are there at the farmers market, talking to the people who are there about the events. And also, Barbara has mentioned already a long list of partners that are engaged, different partners on the ground working with us. That makes our work very efficient. And I think that's one of the highlights that I like to acknowledge. Also, that true collaboration, and also the leadership that these community members who are engaged in the project, they are really excited, very excited about taking on that role and bringing their networks and the people that they serve to the space that to Coolie Landing and Ravenswood Open Space. So some of the challenges, like been mentioned, the permitting process. So it took a while for us to start the project. She also mentioned, the weather, COVID, being safe, and also, like, East Palo Alto is one of the most vulnerable communities to sea level rise and climate extremes. We had very severe flooding early this year. People have suffered from that, and we're still trying to recover. So also, some people are not able to come out because of those reasons and priorities. So Barbara is doing a great job on the ground, engaging the community and our youth. And as you can see from our presentation, there has been a lot of youth engagement throughout the years. And the more we bring out the youth, the parents are also more eager now to participate. And I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, and another point that I wanted to make was Violet has been mentioning, like, wanting to culture that leadership within the community. And this grant allows us to give them money to do it. So compensating people for taking leadership. Not everyone can volunteer their time and have a lot of different priorities. So putting our money where our mouth is and, like, really compensating people for their time has been really key. And even, like, attending meetings, which is already a big ask, providing, like, gift cards and stipends for people who come out and can help us and participate in such a meaningful way, has been also really key to this project.
And good food.
And good food, yes. So yeah, just with that, I wanted to acknowledge the SF Bay Restoration Authority, Mid-Penn, and the City of East Palo Alto for all the support, and also all the volunteers who come and all of the people who have been active partners and really want to see the future more resilient to everything that's to come. I also want to, like, end with this quote that I heard from Chico Mendes, that's like, ecology without class struggle is just gardening. So I think in order to, like, really make that meaningful impact, we need to include everyone.
Okay.